Who was the first, the egg or the chicken? The Getaes or Dacians? What's the difference between them? Between the Getaes and Dacians, not the egg and chicken. Getaes and Dacians are the historical ancestors of modern Romanian people. The Dacians were mentioned for the first time by Julius Caesar himself in the 1st century BC, but the Getaes were mentioned way before, earlier by half a millennium. Herodotus calling them in the 5th century BC the bravest and most just out of all the Thracians. Let's see some context. The Persian Empire was at its height under Darius I. The Persian king leads a campaign beyond Danube and Dniester aimed against the Getaeans in modern Ukraine. He travels from his capital Persepolis up to Europe, where he subjugated the Greeks, and all the other people up to the Danube surrendered without a fight, and pledged support to Darius and his huge army for those times. All the people except the Getaes, so Darius just defeats them easily in battle and then subjugates them as well. We know all this thanks to Herodotus, and we can also deduce from this that the Getaes initially inhabited just the areas south of the Danube, but it's just as likely that they already inhabited the northern side of the Danube as well, but we simply lack the sources. The first sources to mention Getaes north of the Danube appear during the reign of Alexander the Great, when the young conqueror campaigns against the Thracians and arrives at the Danube. Alexander easily defeats the Getaes by sailing unnoticed on the Danube and taking them by surprise. Some 335 BC, the Getaes are for sure living on both banks of the Danube. Working the fields, breeding horses, they even had some fortifications. The first and greatest of the kings in Thrace. This is how the first person that united the Getaes and Dacians was being described during his life. I'm talking about Burebista. But who's this Burebista of which you probably did not hear a lot? Where does he come from and how does he manage to unify, actually to conquer, the tribes of the Getaes and form the so-called Dacian state for the first time? Most likely he was the son of a Getaean king or ruler, and when his father died he simply inherited the small kingdom. In his youth he most probably took part in the nearby wars as a mercenary. Being famous in his time for being a king in Thrace, we can deduce that he firstly conquered the tribes of Getaes and Thracians from the south of Danube and north of the Balkan mountains. He was capable of doing this because in the last decades the Romans killed entire populations of Thracians in the local wars. So there was no great authority or a Thracian king strong enough to stop Burebista's expansion. Later, he went on conquering the small kingdoms of the Dacians in modern-day Transylvania. The Dacians were also tribes of Getaes. While extending into the Dacian land, Burebista entered into conflict with the Celts, which were the Dacians' neighbors. Some very hard wars followed in which Burebista simply annihilated entire populations of Celts, antiquity style. So the remaining Celts left the lands for Western Europe. After all these conquests, Burebista starting to look funny at the rich Greek colony cities on the Black Sea. Funny meaning that he'll impose a tribute on the cities, instead offering his generosity and protection. Some cities accept, like Dionysopolis, but most refuse, so Burebista sieges them, conquers them, and brutally sacks them. An important noble from Dionysopolis, a distinguished citizen named Acornion, will become an important ally to the king of the Getaes. Although a good military man and probably at least a decent diplomat, Burebista shows his politician qualities taking sides in the Roman civil war between Julius Caesar and Pompeius Magnus. Whoever won the war would be the ruler of the great Roman Republic, the greatest power of those times. Therefore, Burebista had to pick one of the two and he put a bet on the safest candidate, the one who had the greatest chances to win. So, he sent his Greek diplomat Acornion of Dionysopolis in Macedonia, where Pompeius was currently encamped. Burebista offered his support to Pompeius and declared himself a friend and ally. Cleverly so, because after Pompeius' sure victory, Burebista's Dacia would become an ally and friend of Rome. We know for sure Burebista's troops did not reach Pompeius, as shortly after the meeting between Acarnion and Pompeius, the Battle of Pharsalos took place, where the larger Pompeian army is routed by the army of Julius Caesar. And so Pompeius fled to Egypt, where he is assassinated. So Burebista took a wrong bet and made himself an enemy of the most powerful man in the world, Julius Caesar. We know from several ancient sources that Caesar, the great conqueror of Gaul, was preparing to punish Burebista through a complex military operation. But on the 5th of March, 44 BC, Caesar gets assassinated by the Roman Senate, or some Roman senators. That makes more sense. Burebista surely threw a great feast when he heard the news, without alcohol of course, because the Dacians were so fond of it that Burebista had to ban it. There was one single problem. The Getae king celebrated early, way too early, because he will follow Caesar in the afterworld in the same year as he was assassinated by his own nobles. Burebista's state was so powerful and mighty that it was being held together solely by Burebista's prestige and reputation. So once the king died, so did the kingdom, dividing into 4, then 5 separate kingdoms. The greatest, most powerful and most important was the Dacian kingdom in modern-day Transylvania. So this was the rise and fall of Burebista's kingdom, but not of the Dacians as a whole. Yet.